The Scottish Government brought forward progressive taxation policies in 2018-19 and the country was warned by the Conservatives at Holyrood that all those affected would leave the country. Yet your article Scots paid £750 million more income tax after changes. The Herald, January 8, contradicts that scaremongering. Those policies of the Scottish Government have paid dividends in the form of £750 million into our public services. This figure was raised and came about partly as a result of a record employment rate for Scotland reached in 2019, people living and working in Scotland despite the scaremongering of the Conservatives, figures that clearly demonstrate that the fiscal policies of the Scottish Government are indeed paying dividends. But your article went on to the very pressing issue of the timetable announced for the next Westminster Budget, March 11, a date that clearly indicates the contempt the Conservative government has for the devolved parliaments of the UK. Scots ministers accuse UK counterparts of disrespect over budget date. The Herald, January 8. There is absolutely no consideration for the fiscal timetables that those parliaments must meet and the knock-on consequences for our local authorities and in turn our public services of late settlements. Those public services on which we all depend on, our precious NHS, education, police, social services and many more could suffer and local authorities may well have to call on their reserves to meet ongoing daily costs, a totally unacceptable position to be put in. Westminster once again riding roughshod over Scotland. Katrina C. Clark, Falkirk. Although the number of Scottish Tory MPs was halved at the general election, they could have found a much better Secretary of State than Alistair Jack, whose performance at Scottish Questions on Wednesday was abysmal and he even blurted out that Scotland voted to leave the EU. Comment storm as PM repeats his opposition to IndyF 2, The Herald, January 9. This is supposed to be an opportunity to hold the London government to account, yet Labour's Ian Murray used his first question to attack the SNP whilst not knowing that Croatia joined the EU with a deficit of 5% of GDP. His contribution was cheered by Tory MPs and I am sure that voters in Labour's deputy leader contest would rather see someone standing up for Scotland over Boris Johnson's sweeping Henry VIII powers under the EU Withdrawal Agreement Bill, which allows London to remove powers from the Scottish Parliament, or on the unjustified 4-month delay in setting a budget date for March 11 while ignoring concerns expressed by the Scottish Government, local authorities and other public bodies who need to plan well ahead of the new financial year in April. Fraser Grant, Edinburgh EH9. Accession to the EU depends on meeting the EU's criteria, so David Me. For more on this story, visit the news article link.